So welcome everybody to the fourth webinar in our public consultation series of webinars for the version 17 draft LEAF Marque Standard public consultation. Today we'll be discussing the proposed changes and updates to the waste and byproduct management section, as well as the water management section of the LEAF Marque Standard. Before we get started, just a brief introduction to myself and my colleague who will be presenting these updates today. My name is Abby Holman. I am the Standards and Impacts Manager in the LEAF Marque team at LEAF. So I look after the development of the LEAF Marque Standard as well as producer-facing support and guidance to meet the requirements, and our impacts work stream defining the long-term impacts and intended outcomes of the LEAF Marque program. I've been with LEAF for just over 2 years now, and I've been in this role since January of this year. And I'll hand over to Molly.
Thanks, Abby. It's good afternoon. My name is Molly, and I am the Standard Setting Officer here at LEAF. I've been with LEAF just over 2 years, and I work directly with Abby in helping to develop control points for the standard.
Thanks, Molly. So a bit of housekeeping before we go into the slides. This session will be recorded, and it will be made available on our YouTube channel, publicly available, so that you or any colleagues or any other stakeholders would like to access the recording, they can do so after today's session. We also, at the end of our slides, will have a question and answer session. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So please do, if you have any questions that come up during the session, feel free to put those questions in the Q&A box. There is also a chat box, but we do request that you put questions in the Q&A box just so we can keep track of them and we don't lose those questions and we're able to respond to them for you. So that will get started. The first bit of our agenda will discuss a bit of context around the version 17 public consultation process, as well as an overview of the key changes to be aware of in version 17. Then we'll talk more specifically about the key changes to the waste and byproduct management and water management sections in the standard. And today, these will be the sort of major changes that we'll be discussing. There are some additional minor wording changes and things like that. So we do recommend that you have a look at the LEAF Marque Standard draft for the full complete picture of changes, really. And then, as we said, at the end of the session, we'll be doing a question and answer session. So to set some context, for those who are new to LEAF and still familiarizing themselves with LEAF and LEAF Marque, LEAF Marque is a global environmental assurance system that recognizes more sustainably farmed products. The LEAF Marque Standard is based on LEAF's integrated farm management principles. So there are 9 principles of integrated farm management, which are summarized in this image on the right. Integrated farm management recognizes that nothing in a farming business acts in isolation. So how you're managing one area of your business will impact another area. For example, how you're monitoring and measuring your waste and byproducts might influence how you're managing water or soils and vice versa. The LEAF Marque Standard is reviewed every 3 to 5 years. This is to ensure that the content remains relevant and evolves with industry and scientific practice and understanding, but also to ensure that we're supporting businesses on the sustainability journey and enabling them to explore how they can build more resilient businesses in the number of different challenges that farming businesses face today. A bit of information about our LEAF Marque Standard consultation. So really the aim of this consultation is to engage with as many stakeholders as possible and gain a wide view and wide range of feedback from stakeholders in the UK and abroad, so outside of the UK. We not only want to engage our members and producers, but also a lot of other stakeholders, whether that be members of the public or supply chains, individuals from government bodies and industry, as well as other NGOs and academics. And we are proposing quite a number of changes to version 17 of the LEAF Marque Standard, and would very much appreciate and are looking for lots of feedback on the feasibility of the requirements we're proposing and how beneficial they might be in supporting producers on the sustainability journey. So there are several ways to be involved in the public consultation. One of those ways you're engaged with now, and that is attending these webinars where we discuss the key changes to the standard to be aware of, as well as answer questions. You can also provide us feedback in the chat, or we do have a very quick follow-up survey that we'll send to you at the end of the session. It takes 1 to 2 minutes to complete, where you can feed back on the changes we're discussing in this session. There's also different ways to feed back via longer surveys online. So these surveys discuss the full list of key changes across the standard. And if you are limited for time, we do have a shorter survey available for you to feed back on the different areas of the standard. We also happily accept any comments or questions or feedback by email, phone, or letter, or methods that are easiest for you to feedback via. At the end of our consultation period, we'll be reviewing all comments and suggestions and feedback and acting on those, on that feedback. And at the end of the consultation period in full, so we will be having a second consultation, but at the end, we will be providing a summary of kind of the key feedback and suggestions that we received during the consultations. As part of the consultation, we also have a summary of changes document available online. This summarizes the key changes to the standard, provides a very quick snapshot, which might be helpful if you are trying to navigate all the different changes in the standard draft. It might be a good reference point. We do have these translated into Spanish, French, and Italian to make this list of changes more accessible to our international audience. Unfortunately, we weren't able to translate the version 17 standard draft for the consultation due to resource challenges, but we do have these summary documents translated, as well as our surveys. And one final note on the consultation, our livestock management section of the standard is still under revision. and will be made available for public consultation comment in the second round of consultation for this standard. We'll do a brief overview of the key changes to version 17 that are important to be aware of. We did go into more detail about these changes in a previous webinar. That webinar was our introductory webinar, and that's available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to understand a bit more about the following key sort of structural and language-related changes, as well as our tiering approach, that will be available in that webinar online. So within version 17, we're proposing quite a few structural changes to help improve not only the navigation of the standard, but also the readability of the standard and the applicability of the standard to a number of different audiences. So within the standard, we have divided the sections into subsections, and control points have been grouped by topic so that it's easier to navigate and sort of group the requirements according to the issues they're addressing or the documentation that's being required. The format of the control points has also been updated for better readability. So we've moved from the current format in version 16.1, which is sort of a bullet point style control point, to a control point broken down by different numbering and lettering so that it's clear exactly which elements are required for businesses to implement. We're also introducing a guidance column into the standard. This guidance column will serve as the first reference point for businesses to understand how to interpret the requirement, what evidence might be required, or providing definitions, examples, things like that. So this is still in development. So some bits of the guidance column are currently blank. There's no guidance in there yet for certain control points, but we are developing that at the moment. We'll also be making an Excel format of the standard available for the first time. And we are exploring formats for different accessibility needs. So for businesses or who have staff that might have learning or reading needs. We're also focused on updating the language in the LEAF Marque Standard. And what we mean by this is making the requirements more internationally applicable. So less reference or UK specific terminology and examples, things like that. And we're also trying to simplify the language so that the requirements are easier to understand and they're more straightforward. We're also going to be introducing a new translation, which actually will be introduced for version 16.1. And that is the standard will be translated into Portuguese and made available for Portuguese speakers. If you do have any other suggestions for other languages that would be helpful for us to translate the standard into, please do let us know, and we will consider that recommendation. Another key change to be aware of is our proposed shift in control point categories and how we define control point compliance. So we're proposing a shift to a more tiered approach. In version 16.1 and all historical versions of the LEAF Marque Standard, we have followed the approach where we have essential and recommended control points. Essential control points have been control points that are mandatory for certification all businesses must comply with them. Recommended control points were optional for certification. Businesses were not required or have not been required to implement these, but they have served as an indicator for continuous improvement, as well as an indicator for what types of requirements might become essential or required for certification in the future. In version 17, we're proposing a change in these categories. First, we're proposing the standard have core control points, and these, similar to the essential control points, will be required for certification. All businesses must comply with these control points. We're then proposing another category of control points, which are advanced control points. These control points will be optional for certification, and they're broken into two categories, the advanced 1 and advanced 2 control points. Advanced 1 control points are more rigorous than core control points, and advanced 2 control points are more rigorous than advanced 1 control points. So they really build on each other in terms of potential rigor in their implementation or in the sustainability outcome related to that requirement. In version 17, we will also have not applicable options across different control points. So we do still recognize that not all control points in the LEAF Marque Standard will be applicable to all businesses in all contexts. So that will remain a feature of the LEAF Marque Standard control points as well. We're proposing as well, in addition to those control point category changes, the availability of this tiering approach in version 17, where we will have a core tier and an advanced tier of LEAF Marque. And these new control point categories correspond to these new LEAF Marque tiers. Really, the aim of doing this, as well as recategorizing the control points to core and advanced, is to demonstrate where LEAF Marque producers are in their integrated farm management or sustainability journey, and highlight and recognize where businesses are promoting best practice and potentially going above and beyond the core requirements, as well as providing opportunities for highlighting continuous improvement and things like that. This table summarizes how these control point categories and how the tiering approach come together. Core control points will be required for certification, and they will be required to meet the core tier of LEAF Marque. They will also be required for meeting the advanced tier of LEAF Marque. Advanced 1 control points will not be required for certification. They will not be required to be in the core tier of LEAF Marque, but they are required to qualify for the advanced tier of LEAF Marque. And the advanced 2 control points will not be required for certification. They will not be required for the core tier, and they will be optional for the advanced tier. So essentially, we're proposing that to demonstrate compliance with the advanced tier, a business will need to meet at least all of the advanced 1 control points. We also wanted to mention that we do plan to provide a way for businesses to demonstrate what criteria they're meeting, what advanced tier they might be falling into. This won't necessarily be on the LEAF Marque certificate itself, but there will be another mechanism available for businesses to demonstrate their progress and what types of criteria they're meeting. With that, I will hand over to Molly to discuss the key changes made to the waste and byproduct management section of the standard.
Thanks, Abby. Okay, so the title of this section has been renamed to better reflect the objectives of integrated farm management and also of the LEAF Marque requirements. So originally pollution control and byproduct management, this section is now named waste and byproduct management, and it focuses specifically on waste and byproducts, whereas pollution management will be integrated into multiple other sections. We do believe it's crucial to incorporate these changes as pollution is a significant issue and linked with other sections of integrated farm management. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first new control point added to the waste and byproduct management section includes control point 4.6, which is wastes or byproducts are utilised. Now this control point is advanced 1, meaning all requirements are encouraged but are not mandatory for certification. And the aim of this control point is to encourage a more circular approach to managing waste and byproducts. It's been added to the section to ensure that measures are taken to minimise or repurpose waste and byproducts, reducing the overall amount of waste and to further prevent unnecessary disposal to landfill. And this could include, for example, improving soil organic matter, energy generation, slurry for straw trading, wool for mulches, or even insulation. Next slide. So another new control point includes 4.7.1, which is food waste produced on farm is managed. Now this control point is core, meaning all requirements must be achieved for certification. It's been added to this section to ensure businesses are identifying causes of food waste on farm and are taking measures and strategies where necessary to reduce food waste, which could include preventing high production of food waste, having options for reusing food waste and also donating food where appropriate and also possible. Now, strategies and targets can be documented in the Waste and Byproduct Management Plan or in Control Point 4.1.2. And businesses must also identify risk areas for food waste and also justify where low risks of food waste are noted. And it's important to note that we will be developing guidance for this control point, as well as providing a definition of food waste, which will be available in the glossary in due course. So control point 4.7.2, which is food waste produced on farm is measured, is another new control point added to this section. Unlike the previous control point, this control point is advanced 2, meaning all requirements are encouraged, but are not mandatory for certification. Now, where possible and appropriate, businesses are encouraged to record the amount of food waste being produced on farm so that they can monitor their effectiveness of the management strategies put in place. But we do understand that this may be difficult for some businesses to implement. So as mentioned, it is an optional requirement, being advanced 2. And again, we will be developing additional guidance for this control point and providing the definition of food waste in the glossary. So another new control point added to this section is 4.8, which is there is no burning or incineration of waste unless justified by the business. Now this control point is core, meaning all requirements must be achieved for certification. The aim of this control point is to prevent pollution caused by the burning and incineration of waste. However, where waste is burnt or incinerated, there must be a justification provided by the business, and it must be done legally according to local and national regulations. Now, the aim of this control point is to prevent the burning of materials and waste that release greenhouse gas emissions and also toxic chemicals into the atmosphere and potentially also into the soils and watercourses as well. Another new control point is 4.9, which is waste is disposed of responsibly and as a last resort after all other options to reuse or recycle are exhausted. Now, this control point is core, meaning all requirements must be achieved for certification. It's been added to the section with the aim of ensuring measures are taken wherever possible to prevent, reduce, or reuse waste first before a business decides to dispose of it. Now, where waste and byproducts cannot be reduced, reused, or recycled, it's important that the business must provide a justification for this. Now, a control point that has had significant amendments or major changes to version 17 includes control point 4.1.1, that is a waste and byproduct assessment. Now, originally a recommended or optional control point, it's now core, meaning all requirements must be achieved, and it's mandatory to carry out certification. Food waste is now required to be considered within this assessment, as well as recording how waste is disposed of and also where. And the aim of this assessment is to support businesses in understanding their different waste streams and to inform waste and byproduct management strategies within the management plan. Although the management plan control point within this section is not mandatory for certification, which is important to note. Now I'll hand back over to Abby to discuss water management.
Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.
So now we will discuss the key changes to be aware of in the water management section. The first important element to note is that there have been many changes to this section. There have been several new control points added, so we will walk through what those control points are and what they are requiring. And really the aim of these changes and these additions is to strengthen this section, but also to support businesses to manage water more sustainably, especially as globally businesses are experiencing more and more water stress, especially through inconsistent weather patterns that bring on drought or floods, which can significantly impact businesses and their enterprises. So this section really aims to bring that support to businesses in mitigating these events, but also managing water use more sustainably. So that might include reducing water use, creating efficiencies, potentially reusing water where possible, and taking measures to prevent pollution to watercourses. So the first control point that has been added to this section, it is new, is 6.4, water is harvested and reused. So this control point, the first thing to note, it is an advanced control point, which means it is not mandatory for certification, but it is encouraged. Where appropriate and where possible, have been strongly emphasized in this control point because we recognize that not all businesses will be able to collect or reuse water. This might be down to sort of legality challenges around rainwater collection or things like that. There also might be long periods where businesses can't actually collect water because of water scarcity challenges like drought. So businesses won't be penalized if they cannot meet one of the elements of this control point. But really the aim is to encourage self-reliance and resilience in terms of water use and access to water. This control point also really aims to encourage businesses to start thinking about how to take that more circular approach to water management and reduce their reliance on certain external sources of water that might be abstracted or purchased. So by collecting water during periods of abundance, for example, rainwater, might help them to mitigate that. But again, we understand that can be quite difficult to do and not always feasible or appropriate for all businesses. The next control point that has been added to this section refers to secure water storage. So 6.5 requires that water is stored securely in appropriate storage facilities. This control point really aims to reduce the risk of water losses and to improve efficiencies and protect resources. Certain elements of the control point are categorized as core, so they will be required for certification, but there's also another element that is categorized as advanced, so this will not be required for certification, but is encouraged where possible. If we look at A, water is stored securely for access during water scarcity. By the phrase storing water securely, we really mean that water storage doesn't have leaks or faulty features that result in water loss or maybe contamination of that water. And then B builds upon that requirement by encouraging businesses to check tanks or pipes or whatever types of water storing mechanisms are in place to make sure that there are no leaks or risks to contaminate that water. Then the last element of the control point, C, which is categorized as advanced, requires that water is stored for at least 48 hours to support the business's water needs, particularly for irrigation, in the event that water supply might be cut off or limited. Again, we don't expect all businesses to be able to meet this type of requirement, but this control point would potentially be helpful where businesses are irrigating crops or have livestock and potentially experience maybe inconsistent periods of water scarcity and challenges such as that. The next new control point is 6.6. Measures are taken to mitigate flooding risks and impacts. This control point aims to ensure businesses are planning and preparing for flooding conditions to reduce the negative impacts of flooding on the farm. This may sound like a requirement that's only relevant to businesses in geographies with heavier rainfall. However, this would also apply to other contexts, such as areas that experience periods of drought followed by extreme weather patterns, such as storms and heavy rainfall that might be less frequent, but when they do occur, they're short and intense and potentially quite negatively impactful on the business. So the first requirement, A, is categorized as core, which means it would be required for certification. And this requirement ensures businesses are looking at how different areas of their site might be impacted by flooding on the if it occurs. The second element of the control point is an advanced requirement, and it builds upon that first requirement. So once a business has been able to identify those risk areas and those potential negative impacts, then they're encouraged to think about how they can implement measures to mitigate those flood risks or reduce those negative impacts. And we recognize it's not always straightforward or easy to implement these types of measures to mitigate or prevent these risks and impacts from flooding events. So again, this is categorized as an advanced requirement in that sense. The next new control point is 6.8. Water outlets are monitored to prevent or reduce water loss. So again, this control point is categorized as core, so this will be required for certification. And we really chose to make this a core control point to introduce this action as part of best practice measures for sustainable water management. This control point aims to help reduce water loss and improve efficiency by checking for those signs of leakage or water loss from different outlets such as taps, hoses, pipes, because even minor leaks can result in significant water use and waste over time, which can be particularly impactful when we're thinking about areas where water scarcity is a frequent concern. The next new control point is 6.9. Quantity of water used across the business is monitored to improve efficiency. While several other control points focus on reducing water use and increasing efficiency in terms of crops and irrigation, this control point goes a bit more broadly to encourage producers to monitor and understand their water use across the business to improve efficiencies, not only in areas like irrigation, but potentially also where might water savings and efficiencies be possible in buildings and so forth, or more for more administrative uses across the business. We recognize that this might not be feasible or practical for all businesses to do at this stage. So again, this is required as an advanced one requirement and won't be mandatory for certification, but is encouraged where feasible. The final new control point to be aware of is 6.11. Actions are taken to actively improve and protect water quality and the health of water bodies on farm and adjacent to the farm. This control point was added to ensure businesses are taking measures to prevent the pollution of water bodies, including from discharged water. This control point builds on the pollution risk assessment that's required within our business planning and resilience section of the standard. The first requirement within this control point, A, is core, so this is required for certification. And this requires that businesses are taking measures to ensure that any water that's discharged into the environment is safe and quote unquote healthy, and won't be releasing potential contaminants, excess nutrients, things like that. The final two elements of the control point, B and C, build on this in providing more specific measures to help mitigate the impact of water discharged to the environment. So this entails creating buffer zones, and we've specified those are 5 to 10 meters from rivers, streams, or other water courses or water bodies to minimize and mitigate those pollution risks. And then C requires that water is captured and filtered before being discharged if necessary, So an example where this would likely apply would be for indoor vertical farming systems or protected cropping systems, potentially where discharged water might contain contaminants or excess nutrients, might be proactive to test and filter that water before it's discharged if it is not already being cleaned and reused by the business. So with that, we've covered the key changes to the waste and byproduct management section and water management section of version 17. A bit of information about next steps in the development of version 17. So as you know, we're currently in our first round of public consultation. We do have those surveys available for stakeholders to provide more detailed or additional feedback about these requirements and proposed changes. And we do have one more webinar remaining to discuss the key changes to the energy and greenhouse gas emissions section, as well as the landscape and biodiversity section. All of these webinars, again, will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel, so they'll be publicly available to access. Following the consultation, we'll be reviewing and integrating feedback and revisions into the standard, and then we will announce our second round of consultation in a few months' time. The aim is to publish version 17 in 2025, and once it's published, the standard will have a transition period of 6 months, and it will become effective for auditing after that 6-month transition period.